I should appreciate that they did end the show suggesting that much of it may be occurring in Dolores' sublime simulation, but I am incredibly disappointed with this ending. Well, one of the themes of this season was disappointment, I guess.
Real life can be disappointing. Not that it's so bad, just there should be more to it.
This ending, where we are supposed to accept that the bizarre behavior of Dolores' boss and her Teddy Mirage are just to escape boredom, completely destroys any incentive to try and decipher mysteries in the show.
You sound depressed.
I suppose we shouldn't fault it at this point for the enormous nothing burger that was retrieving Maeve or the involvement of the Outlier group, and never resolving all of the other mysteries, like Caleb's mysterious insight,
Because I have something you don't have.
what was happening in the larger world outside of New York, if transcendence was simply being put in the tall, armless bodies and what significance this had, or the dead birds. It's all just colors and sounds to distract you from your own boredom, after all. But on a deeper thematic level, it reveals an ugly nihilism at the core of the show. While I thought this pessimism was confined to humanity and our obvious imperfections, this ending extends that to all intelligences and consciousnesses. This ending suggests that the show really does believe consciousness is simply suffering, for other beings and the self, and all art, religion, and philosophy are temporary distractions from this destructiveness.
Culture doesn't survive. Cockroaches do.
This idea that memory gives control, which was established in the first season, where using a simulation to predict behavior grants power to the predictor, is stripped of meaning in a world that has no life outside of the simulation to predict. The symbolism of Orion's belt, or the three-pronged earpieces, which seem to fit with Janes's concept of using imagination to extrapolate a path from the past through the present, leading to possible futures, doesn't work when there's no future to predict, or at least no outside world with a past and a present to extrapolate. The show seems to be cognizant of history, particularly the recent history of America to the Old West era, the ending of slavery in the United States, going so far as to include Confederados as antagonists. How it can be so nihilistic in that context, to suggest that thinking is only suffering and that the project of intelligent life and civilization is a meaningless diversion, is beyond my comprehension. Even if you disagree with that mildly politically charged statement that ending slavery as the result of the U.S. Civil War was actually unironically good, how can you argue with the process of medical science, again specifically referenced in lines from the first episode of the show, and more generally just casually implied by the medical technology demonstrated on the show in contrast with the primitive state of medicine as recently as the time of the Old West? Why even mention this if your thesis is that intelligence is pointless? Medicine not unironically good is not a take I've heard. I guess I can accept that the explicit reference to Sherlock Holmes that the line deep in dreamless slumber represents is supposed to be read as a reference to murder and how the mind is used to kill, rather than perhaps the more straightforward idea that Sherlock Holmes was a detective that solved crimes using his mind.
War. It's that good, huh?
And when they say that war is the ultimate game, it is supposed to simply reference the destructive violence of war, and not the potential positive outcomes of war, like throwing off a quasi-feudal monarchy in favor of democracy, or destroying the institution of slavery. And maybe we're supposed to ignore statements like this one, made by the creators in promotional media, which seems to imply that figuring out the mysteries of the show was a worthwhile endeavor, and which seemed to specifically call out the dissatisfactory ending of Lost without mentioning it by name. But what Westworld ultimately represents is an insult to intelligence. It is built around a core idea that intelligence is self-destructive suffering, and that all thought can do is temporarily distract from that fact. And to be a more effective distraction, it was happy to pretend that it was something more significant. It was simply an elaborate J.J. Abrams mystery box all along. And this is so destructive because it diminishes the credibility of any other show that promises to set up big ideas with big payoffs. Creators of Westworld specifically promised payoffs in outside interviews. Now that method of communicating with audiences has been discredited as a result. We likely will not be getting a fifth season of Westworld, at least not from HBO. This ending seems purposefully written to make a fifth season difficult to do. I would imagine that the incredibly acrimonious war between J.J. Abrams and the new CEO of Warner, David Zaslav, killed Westworld in the crossfire. And so Westworld will fade away, without the dignity of an actual cancellation, at least not for months or years after this last episode, when almost no one will notice. Perhaps this is fitting for such an insultingly nihilistic show. I think you might be able to tell that that was recorded before the announcement on Friday that Westworld has been officially canceled. I actually wrote most of this a few days after the finale aired, but this video has been really hard to make. For one, I was so disappointed in this ending and the ultimate nihilistic message of the show, a message I didn't see until this last episode made it clear. And also because this video is so negative, I know it will disappoint a lot of you who, like I did, really like the show. I hope you'll subscribe or stay subscribed to catch my upcoming video on House of the Dragon and how my opinion on that show has changed over the course of the season. I also will be making an actual review and recommendation, as opposed to my more typical deep analysis, for the show Industry, also on HBO. Until then, this has been Shiva's Right Foot, and I'll talk to you next time.